talk today about the 6th and 12th house axis. Okay, so if you have looked at your chart, you should already know, do you have 6th house placements? Do you have 12th house placements? Now, some people may have placements, and I'm sorry about the lighting. It is what it is. I film when I can. Some people may notice that you may have 6th house placements but not 12, or you have 12 but not 6, etc. Or you have no placements at all in the 6th house, but sometimes you can have a transit where it's going to activate those houses. Now, the 6th house is daily life. It is associated with health, work, service, day-to-day tasks, things we have to do, not always the things we want to do. Sometimes the 6th house can also be associated, especially if we're drilling a little bit like more, in more the minor aspects of what it could indicate, things like stores. Okay, stores, going to the store, errands, things like that is 6th house. So if you have 6th house placements and you find you're busy a lot, or you run a lot of errands, or you like doing errands, because remember the 6th house is ruled by Mercury, house associated with Virgo. If you like getting things done, if you like crossing things off your task list, or you're just someone that's just busy, because maybe you have a Mars and Aquarius in the 6th house, and you're not really meticulous, but you're very good at problem solving, or you're really busy all the time doing various things, right? The 12th house is across from the 6th house. And so I think I do have a video where I talk more about the houses, but this one I want to talk specifically about just these two at this particular time. 12th house. Okay, so now we're dealing with Neptunian themes. If you're talking traditional astrology, we're dealing with Jupiter themes. Okay, so the 12th house is distant from the day-to-day. It is less time-based. 6th house is about time. When are you doing it? When is it getting done? What do you have to do today? Right? Health, things that are more visible. 12th house can be sometimes associated more with our mental health, because these could be things more under the surface, things that are hidden, things we don't visibly see. The 12th house traditionally was considered to be a house that was unfavorable. The 6th house was also unfavorable. The 6th house meant burdensome work. The 6th house was illness. The 6th house was like servitude. Some old books will refer to 6th house even as like slavery, okay? And again, depending on the context, obviously slavery can have different, meanings depending on, which country you're talking about, which historical point of time, but let's just use the definition of slave, right? Because you were being overworked. You did not have leisure time. You were not free from whatever it is you owed. That's the 6th house, okay? Now, I'm just gonna go into a history lesson. I'm not gonna do that right now because I have an education, so I do know a lot about history, but we're not gonna go into a history lesson right now. 12th house was associated with different things, right? So 12th house associated with enemies, sorrow. Okay, if you look here, this book is Traditional Astrology for Today. Again, I'm a modern astrologer, but I believe in dabbling in understanding a lot of the different modes of astrology. So that way, when I come across something that is more traditional leaning, I understand how to, how it works within the framework of what I do. So this is a traditional wheel. So you're going to see the associations are pretty similar for most modern explanations, but it's different as well. So the 12th house is enemies and sorrow. Okay. So traditionally, the 6th and 12th house are not considered to be good things. Now, why might that be? All right. Now, think about historically what work meant. Historically, people who, and we're talking about centuries and centuries ago, people who were rich had all the power, and you had to be born into nobility or born into a certain family, right? Or just really get lucky. So most people had to work, or, their families had to work. And so the 6th house was considered a place, there was nothing, you weren't creating your own daily schedule. It wasn't like today where people can choose what to do. It wasn't like today where people can say, I want to be an influencer, or I want to make money off social media. Some people have jobs, but they film their job and make additional money off, social media networks, right? So the 6th house traditionally, of course, was going to be a very arduous, difficult place because this is work and you don't have leisure time. The 12th house is disassociated. It is traditionally mental hospitals. It is hospitals. It is being isolated. It is solitude. It is being away from society. It is being disconnected. Okay, so think of traditionally, you're sending people away. You're sending people away who do not conform. You're sending people away who have ailments that you don't know how to fix, especially when we talk about mental health and how far we've come as a society, right? So traditionally, these are misfortune. These are houses of bad fortune. So if you read some books, it'll tell you there are certain charts that'll say good fortune for certain houses. Now, how does that apply to today, right? Or how should you look at it? I have 6 and 12 house placements. When I actually look at my 6th house placement, and it's a retrograde planet, I had to understand how actually it's benefited me, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, the 6th house is active. It is still going to sometimes bring a little bit of challenge, okay? Because you have something that you have to resolve. And so that's where the 6th house can sometimes still be a little bit challenging for some people. You have, whatever's in your 6th house, you need to resolve it. You need to work through it. You need to fix it. You need to use it. You need to apply it to your daily life. You need to be mindful because it's the area of your life that you need to spend the most time resolving, working through, improving, checking it, quality check. If you quality check something, you got to make sure everything's right and where it needs to be. So 6th house, I have not really necessarily seen it super negative, but we have to also understand it's going to be different for each person. So like, for instance, for some people, it can represent chronic health issues depending on what planet's there. It can represent whatever planet's there, whatever sign is there. The area of health we all need to pay attention to, right? So with the 6th house, but we also can look at it through the modern context of the 6th house. We have more choices than our ancestors did. We have more of a choice in what does my day-to-day look like, because for most people, again, I'm just speaking from where I'm from, like for the most part, most of us are not necessarily working the same job, the same industries as our parents were, right? We don't really have the same pressure. Now, some families do have that pressure. You're going to do what I'm doing because this is traditional in our family. We all work here. We all do this. But for many people who don't have that option, you are creating your own day-to-day. You're creating your own work schedule, you're creating what it looks like for you, okay? So in traditionally, Aquarius in your 6th house would be erratic jobs, odd jobs, someone that couldn't pin down a job, right? Because Aquarius can represent disruption. It can represent any place where there's inconsistency. But in the modern context of what Aquarius represents, for some people can mean if you have Aquarius in the cusp or you have Uranus in that 6th house or something like that, it can represent you work in technology, your day-to-day life. You benefit from working in fields where you're dealing with the online, dealing with some type of like technology, something online. Okay, so your 6th house placements, even if you have transits going to your 6th house, it is, what are you doing every day? How are you applying what you're doing every day? It won't feel burdensome when you use the energy. When you look at what planets in your 6th house, when you plan, you're going to be better off. When you don't plan, it's going to feel like a drag, right? Saturn in the 6th house, when you plan what to work on, when you schedule out your own goals, great. When you don't schedule out your goals, when you don't care about your own goals, when you have no direction in life, people then assign it to you. I hope that makes sense. I say that a lot about energy, and I say that a lot about astrology, and I say that about our birth charts. We have to learn to tap into the energy that's already there. It's going to happen either way. The energy is going to show up. But right, and universe only knows frequency, right? Universe is not, it's not about what oh, I feel this, or I want to do this, or maybe wish once upon a star, wish upon a star. It understands frequency. And so if we look at it that way, the energy is going to happen. But are you applying it, or is the universe just saying, all right, well, I'm gonna just make a decision for you, because the energy has to play out. Okay, it has to play out. So with the 6th house, we are looking at, and sometimes we are assigned things through the 6th house. The 6th house can also feel like an assignment, right? And it could be, think about it like even spiritually, it's across in the 12th house. The 6th house, what we are here to do though on the daily, where's our collective work? What are we here to invest in? What are we here to do? What are we here to make sure is a part of our daily routine, our daily lives? What are we giving service to? What do we care the most about in terms of service? So it will feel like an assignment. Whatever's in your 6th house, it is an assignment. It is something you must tend to. You must do it. Okay? You have to do it. You have to see, okay, I'm here Jupiter, you have Jupiter in the sixth house. You're here to dispense knowledge to people. Figure out how to do that. Okay. You have sixth house, you have Neptune, or you have, let's say someone has Venus conjunct Neptune, sixth house. You have to learn how you are uplifting people in terms of the relationships that you have with them. How are you influential, inspiring these people? And again, it can represent your work, the type of work you do, right? If you have Saturn and Capricorn in the sixth house, you're here. What major goals in life are you here to really fine tune and work through? Now, again, if people then have North Node in the sixth house, that means an added layer of tapping into your purpose. If you have South Node in sixth house, you now have 12th house North Node. So we're going to talk about the 12th house in a moment, but I wanted to really help us understand the sixth house and what it is. Yes, it's an assignment. Yes, it's work. Yes, it is something we have to tend to, but that's why I also say health. We have to look at it and we have to say, okay, these are the things I need to check off and make sure are really functioning and working well in my life, right? Because even though traditionally it meant hard work, arduous work, you were in servitude, now it can represent something different in a modern context, in a modern society, okay? Because we have to, I do agree with there are rules to astrology. There are definitions to astrology. I don't agree with people creating things that, people kind of sometimes take liberty with things, especially like newer astrologers, people who are a little bit younger. And so I always like to make sure I have a range of different people I study from who've done this for a long time, and then I come up with my own conclusions. But you will sometimes have people who, again, I think it's beautiful that we have a lot of young astrologers who can relate to people who are younger, right? And get people who are younger interested in astrology. That's the only way to keep something going. It can't just be the older generation doing it. It has to be younger people understanding as well. But I do think there is something to learning from older people. Like, we should learn from people who've been doing this longer, and then we could put our own spin on it. But we want to be careful when we come into something new and we're changing things up so much where it's like it's losing its foundation. Because if someone doesn't have a lot of life experience, you don't have the range to start changing rules, right? We change rules once we have tested things out throughout time. So it should ideally be a culmination of the old and the new, but it's a whole different conversation, okay? Because there are certain things. So even when I described the sixth house, right? See how I didn't deviate too much? I didn't say it's this brand new thing. The sixth house no longer means work. It no longer means something difficult, or it no longer means an assignment. It no longer means something we have to tend to, we have to work to, something we don't have a choice really to do. See how I didn't deviate too much? So when you are applying modern concepts to traditional things, especially when we talk about astrology or anything that's already has a framework, we don't want to go too far out where we're completely changing the meaning of houses and signs and saying things, and people are saying, well, a Gemini is just a Capricorn that does this, a Pisces is just a Sagittarius. It's like no. There's meanings, there's definitions, there are overlaps, but we have to be very clear, or else we are not practicing astrology. When we start making stuff up, I can't make stuff up based off my own experience. Sorry, I'm going to a little rant, but that is something I do think is really important. It's us for understand the origins of things, where they come from, so we can truly make decisions in how we are delivering content. So I've talked more about the 6th, 12th, okay? And I have videos about the 12th house a lot. We are dealing with 12th house themes, right? Remember, this is a disconnect. This is the stuff we want to do. This is what we don't want to, we don't want to have to, the 12th house is so optional that it sometimes can feel like stunted energy. If you have your sun in the 12th house, sometimes you could always feel like there's some part of you that you can't quite visibly show. Or if you have Mars in the 12th house, you can feel stuck in activity, and that's why I say it's so important to look at your transits and look at what's in your natal chart, because if you have a lot of 12th house energy, that means your 6th house, you can spend a lot of time in your 12th house and not your 6th house. You spend a lot of time on projects that never come off the ground, 12th house. You spend a lot of time focusing on things that will never materialize, right? Instead of paying attention to things that have to materialize, 6th house. Vice versa, 6th house, you have a lot of energy going on in 6th house, but then you feel so disconnected from your dreams and your passions and what you really want because you're so busy focused on these things you have to deal with. So that can sometimes come up. When you're dealing with 12th house energy, remember, we are, again, so traditionally, isolation, solitude, imprisonment, things like that. Because you are taking people away, you're putting them in a space where they are no longer around people, or they're not able to have freedom. So the thing you also want to understand about the 12th house, though, think about that traditionally. If you're taking someone and you're saying, you got to go, we're putting you here. We don't understand how to deal with you. We're putting you here, or you're going to we're banishing you. You're imprisoned, or whatever. What that sometimes indicates, think of the modern context, is you sometimes have to be in solitude to learn your lesson, to understand who you are away from distractions. 12th house, if you are looking at the 12th house through that lens, modern context is you might know yourself best when you are alone. Ask yourself, what do you do when you're alone, when you're in solitude? Ask yourself, why are you here? Why are you here? When we look at the 12th house from the modern context, we are less likely to be talking about being isolated or hospitals, but hospitals can be themes, right? So you get people, if they've had a stint in hospitals, maybe the transit represents that. But when we look at it through the lens of traditional astrology, it is going to represent enemies, people plotting against you, things that are hidden. Well, because remember, we think about the 12th house is a gateway. And so if it's a gateway, we also have to realize the fact that there are sometimes things that are not really clear. And so when you think of why people sometimes do things to isolate themselves from society, do crimes, things like that, is because there's a disconnect. There is a inability to understand how to function in this world. Now, for most people, 12th house placement, it's not that you're going to become a criminal. You don't want to be a criminal, but it's the same theme. I hope this makes sense. It's difficulty struggling with knowing how to function in this world, with these rules, with these laws, with the way things are. So it sometimes forces people, or people sometimes do things that are odd or against the norm, because of this disassociation from this world, or disassociation with people, or disassociation with the masses. All right. And so the extreme of that is a person who is so disconnected from society, they do engage in criminal activity, or they do things, against humanity, or things of that nature. Because again, the 12th house, what you do alone is going to show you a lot about what you feel about yourself. What you do alone is going to show you a lot about what's missing. So the 12th house, when you are in solitude, it's showing you, what do you do when you're alone, right? What is your favorite thing to do? And sometimes for some people, you can bring that out. You can turn the traditional concept of suffering and sorrow, the 12th house, into what could it mean today in terms of compassion, in terms of humanity, right? In terms of a lot of people, 12th house energy, you're trying to figure out what you are here to do, because it's beyond your own ego. So you might have 12th house placements because in a past life, you did not know how to show mercy to people. You did not know how to have compassion. Now you're here. Now, again, some people, everything, despite having a birth chart, there's concepts of free will, right? So you might not know what to do with that energy. When you feel lonely, right? It is because there's an absence of something you feel you should have. The 12th house can also be applied in the modern context of how to create what does not exist in this world called an earth. We always need creatives. We always need people who are inspired. We always are going to need people who see a vision nobody else sees. If you think of some of the greatest musicians in history, sorry, you might hear a trash truck in the background. All right, the greatest musicians, the greatest inventors, the greatest artists, the greatest whatever of all time, whoever those people are to you, typically did something unique or different, or they believed in themselves at a time when people said that's not possible. And with 12th house energy, remember, that is not possible. It's going to feel like that. And that's why some people can get stuck creatively there. If you have maybe even like Neptune there, if you have Mercury there, if you have Mars there, you can get stuck in what I think, what I believe, what I am is not possible on Earth. It's not possible here. So I'm either going to disconnect from society, I'm going to isolate myself, I'm going to hide the things I really like, because what I want is not possible. If what you want is positive, what you want can help people, what you want can inspire people in good ways, a lot of times 12th house individuals, we have to learn how to apply some of that to Earth. You are giving back. In some way, shape, or form, you are giving back. That does not mean you have to be a martyr. It does not mean you have to give your money out to people and be this big philanthropist. Some people might, if you make it that way, right? But that is not what it's about. but it is about you on this learning mission. And when people have 12 and 6th house placements, yes, 6th house, you're going to be very busy. You're going to know, typically, especially depending on the planet, like what to do, how to get your daily life needs met, how to get things done, how to do what you need to do, all of that. But the 12th house is there as well because it's a message to you that is important for you to utilize that energy to understand how to bring it out. You might understand things on a spiritual level that you can't even explain to people. But how do you translate that in a way in which you can explain to people, right? 12th house, if you're here to learn better spiritual relationships with people, if you're here to learn not to be materialistic, if you're here to learn not to just, date people for status, again, depending on the birth chart, you would see that, right? And you have, I don't know, Libra in the 12th house and Venus or something like that, or some other stuff in your 12th house showing this is a theme. For you, you're here to learn how to have better soul connections with people. You're here to learn how to have better, genuine relationships that beyond what you get from somebody, right? But you can't just do that you can do that on the astral plane if you want. You can do that inside your head or your imagination, but really you're here to bring it out. So if you look at the 12th house, it's like also people like looking at like, how does your 12th house impact your 6th house and vice versa? How do the things you do in daily life, can you bring them can you find ways to bridge to the things you really dream and want to do? You have 6th house energy and you're like, yeah, I make good money, I'm good, but some people might end up, but you can use what you make in your career to fund the things you want to do, the things you dream of doing. And the thing about the 12th house, you're also not always needing to capitalize off of those gifts or off of your compassion or off of your spirituality. I'm not saying everybody has to become a spiritual person with a spiritual shop online, and I'm not saying everybody has to do those things unless that's what you want to do. But I am saying that how do you use what's in those? If someone has 12th house Mercury, you have a 12th house Mercury and you have all these ideas and you're struggling how to do them. Look at your 6th house. What is something that's already positioned in your chart that would actually help you do that, right? Because you might have Mercury, but you have Uranus in the 6th house. Oh, well, other people, your community can help you bring those ideas out. You need to bring these ideas you have that you stuck in your head, bring them somewhere. And somebody else can work on them. Sometimes we also think we have to do everything. And people who are entrepreneurs and hire people know this. We think we have to do everything and we have to, we have this idea. So we're going to create the idea. We're going to build it. We're going to do it. We're going to sell it. We're going to market it. You can utilize other people to bring forth your vision, your idea. You can have something, an idea, and bring it to other people to do, right? You can tell other people, like, hey, I'm going to set this up, but actually, I'm not the one that's going to be doing it. Hey, folks, let me drop this idea. Y'all run with it, right? So that's also an idea and things that I think we sometimes forget. People think like, well, everybody needs to be a business owner and you don't have to do that. But what you do want to do is fulfill the mission of your chart, because energetically you're going to feel aligned. And when something happens that lines up with the maze, so to speak, of your birth chart, and like, how there can be like checkpoints you're supposed to have in your life. And if you believe that your soul creates your life, or your soul before you're born, makes decisions about your life, you believe that, you would look at it as like a checkpoint. If you play a video game, you've played a video game and there's like a pause point, you can save the game. But if you play the old games back in the day, it would be like a clear checkpoint of like, oh, if you go back to the game, like there it is. But it's like, it's a map, right? Because you're supposed to hit these different checkpoints to show you that you're on the right path. And so that is something your feel. I can't explain it. It's not going to be somebody with a magic, waving a green flag. It might not even be angel numbers, but you're going to feel aligned because it is a part of what you're supposed to do. And some of the things that we're supposed to do can be minor. People who have Virgo in the 12th house may understand that. People who have Pisces in the 6th house may understand that. Because everything doesn't have to be, it's a great magnitude, huge fireworks situation. You can find value in things that seem unordinary, or that don't seem extraordinary, things that just seem minor, things that just seem small, but those things can actually make a big impact. Those things can be even more meaningful, right? So that is what you can sometimes do as well. Utilize the energy that's in your 12th house, right? Utilize energies in your 12th house to dream, to when you are away from everybody, you're going to be productive doing these things. But you struggle to have confidence. But you don't believe it's real. But you have talents you're afraid to show people. but you've been isolated, but people have told you it's not possible, but people think you're crazy for some of your ideas. But are we bringing them to the right people? Are we bringing them to the right space? What are those different, the different needs? A lot of times we are operating under fear. And when we operate under fear, we do the things that are safe. We're going to do the things that feel safe. And what feels safe is often what is something someone else has prescribed for us to do, because we know we'll get validation. So the biggest part I would say of this axis, the 6th and 12th house, it is how to utilize the things that come easier to you. It's always going to be 6 is literal. So compared to the 12th house is more rewarding on a spiritual level. The 6th house is more rewarding in terms of like a physical level. Okay, we look at it that way. Okay, ideally you can merge the two if you have 12th and 6th house placements. But you have to learn how to. 6th house is always going to be there. It's going to be click. It's going to be obvious in your face. The 12th house can feel more distant. It can feel more disconnected from your 6th house. But really, look at those planets. Look at what's in your 12th house. How does it support what is already there? Okay, you're bringing your talents. You Leo in the 12th house. You are bringing your talent. You are bringing your creativity. But you have Aquarius in 6th house to people, to a community. They will appreciate it. Your creativity is here to help other people. It's not just for you to hold on to and hide it. You might feel better doing that, because that's how you'll get better. 12th house people, you get better in solitude. You do need your space from people. You're going to do your best thinking. Mercury in 12th, you're going to do your best thinking away from people. You're going to know exactly what to say. You have time to think about it. Okay, Uranus, 12th house, you're going to do best when you experiment on your own. You're going to come up with some really interesting conclusions, right? You're going to do best when you're away. Okay, but then if you have 6th house placements, it's like, how do you bring that into your daily life? How do you take those things and someone like translating it? You're translating it to a different language in a way, because you're using it, the other energy in the chart, the other sign, right? But that is it. So if you got through this whole video, you found this interesting, please feel free to drop in the comments, which axis do you want me to do next? 1st and 7th house placements, 9 and 3, whatever. Okay.